Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, and I'm the General Counsel for Chain Argos. And with me, as usual, Jonathan Ryder, our CEO and Chief Data Scientist. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being a fan. So what do we have for them this week? We've got a couple of interesting updates as well, on top of our usual stuff. But let's go. We're going to talk about the USPD hack, the Starknet outage, the 2Z part two of the double zero. Basically, that saga continues. And then we're gonna run through a little bit of stuff about the just to add on to some of the content that we had for you on ETH that we were talking about earlier. But let's talk about this USPD hack, which I think if you guys surf by our Medium page, you'll be able to read the full article about that. But maybe you can give us a download.
So this is an interesting one in that I contend this is not properly called a hack. Um, so what happened is that this is a stablecoin thing. The details of it don't really matter.
Yeah.
When they were deploying the contracts, someone effectively front ran the deployment process and snuck in some code to take control and intercept
Huh.
calls. And then they waited until there was enough money in the thing to yank the money out. Fine. That's what I meant by the details aren't really okay. So what's interesting here is that it's I'll say well known. It's known that there is a problem in general with publishing a contract who doesn't yet have an owner that narrow admin controls, and
Yeah.
then someone has to go in and claim the admin controls.
Yep.
Stylistically, you will need to do that as a single atomic operation. Otherwise,
Yeah.
clearly control can be front run away from you.
Which is
Uh,
what happened here.
which is what happened here. Now, what's kind of amusing here is that the hacker, the interceptor, the front runner,
Hackers,
went.
I don't think is appropriate. Yeah.
It's not.
I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah,
I agree
yeah.
with you.
Went to reasonably good lengths to make it not obvious what was going on. In that, how do I say? The calls were redirected somewhere else in a way that Etherscan did not show you in all of the places that you could find an Etherscan. So a naive person reading the code and trying to trace the transaction, such as
Hmm.
it is, would not recognize that there was a malicious thing going on. We've discussed a number of protocols where there are, you know, delegations of control that are not visible on, Etherscan, whatever traces. You have to use other tools. You have to look at stuff more carefully.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't actually watch the flow of control of something directly on Etherscan for past transactions.
I don't think that's fair. I mean, oftentimes, I mean, that's not really what it's meant to do anyway.
Yeah, it'll show you all the logs that were emitted.
Yeah.
And if the hidden code, if the code that's
It's not
supposed to
hidden.
be hidden doesn't emit logs, then
Yeah.
okay, so it only shows the debug messages that the code spat out effectively. It's
Fair
conceptually what
enough.
logs are. Okay. Now, in this case, the team claimed, a number of people claimed that because of the way this was done, it was a hack, it could not be seen, it was hidden, whatever, Etherscan. And that's where I really take exception to the description,
Yeah.
because if you look at the deployment transaction,
Yeah.
you can tell because of logs emitted that you can see even on Etherscan. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Forget that if you're deploying a system, you should have a way to audit your deployment correctly yourself.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You can see logs emitted changing the control to the addresses that are now listed as the hacker.
Well, not hacker.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the person who deployed this should clearly have checked what happened. And then when they presumably tried to initiate a transaction to take control, they'd have, checked the logs that came out,
Yeah, that
confirmed that
that
it worked. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
part confuses me a little bit. Like,
Well, it was clearly just done negligently, incompetently, maliciously. Like it wouldn't be the first time the team did. Like
true.
whatever. I'm not saying that's what happened, but
Yeah.
you know, so that's pretty entertaining. And in fact, in this case, a person who you could see on GitHub, they've subsequently deleted their repos. So you'll have to believe me on this, or maybe we'll produce some copies that we have somewhere. Uh, was actually working on scripts with comments that look like there were deployment problems and they were trying to fix the deployment problems.
Okay.
So and this is pure speculation. They launched the thing. By the time they figured out there was a problem, real money was already
You really,
inside, and they
yeah,
decided we can't admit what's happened. Yeah, like
that's almost certainly what happened.
I agree with you that that feels like the most likely explanation.
Yeah.
The person who did that GitHub account matches a Twitter account that has a common website and so like I 99% know who this is. They were tagged, in fact, on the Twitter thread. They have not responded in any way. I'm not suggesting that person did anything wrong. I
Yeah.
suspect that that person has information about who they told there was a problem and told them just don't mention this to anybody. But whatever. We clearly don't have any evidence in that direction. So whatever. Um, yeah. So and then to put really a fine point on this, if this is a hack, then the Pereira Bueno brothers are guilty of hacking
Yeah.
because it's conceptually and mechanically it's the same front running, right?
I think l- legally speaking, I have some problems with that being characterized as a hack
No, wait, sorry, but
because
sorry, just step back for a second. Legally speaking, there's no daylight between these two cases.
yeah, correct. And there's no daylight between these cases, but also I struggle a little bit to classify this one as a hack because, you know, it's a bit like with mega markets there was that whole issue about, front running and stuff like that. But in this case, I feel that the team themselves also has a degree of responsibility to take for the fact that they must have known when they tried to wrestle back control. And that would have been an opportunity to actually have made a public announcement to say, hey, look, we kind of goofed on this one. Please do not put any more good money after bad.
Yeah.
That
Man,
there's ample opportunity.
Mago Markets was about moving a price in one place to cause a protocol behavior based on that price in
Correct.
another place. There's no trading going on here. This
Yeah.
is really mechanical. I mean, this is as much trading as a sandwich attack is trading, right?
Yeah.
There's no risk in the transactions. If they go
Yeah.
through, you take the money. Like that's not risk management trading. That's technology interception. Um, yes,
And
I don't know.
I don't know either. And quite frankly, I don't know what the level of responsibility or duty of care is. And like, it's like if you find a $5 bill on the street, I mean, you pick it up. Are you bound to go and find out who actually owns it?
Yeah, I mean, if you watch it fall out of someone's trousers, then you're supposed to. But if it's just sitting there in a vacant street, what are you supposed to,
Well, what is
a
the what
wallet
is
with
the
ID is different than a, yeah.
I don't know. I struggle with this stuff, and I think we'll find out. And I think I look forward to working with the many, many competent attorneys who are going to be legislating, litigating this stuff for years to come.
I mean, and in this case, people have argued forcefully that these are sort of adults engaged in competition and clear rules.
Yeah,
And if you're going to argue that, you have to argue that this doesn't count as a hack and that these
I
people
agree.
were incompetent,
I
right? And they
agree.
should be socially sanctioned by not hiring them until they admit they made a mistake, whatever,
I
something
mean,
like that, right? Because
shaming
that's
is not
well,
is
no,
is
I don't mean it's not about that, right? But if you don't admit that this
yeah,
is expected
I
and
don't know.
legal, if you make
Yeah,
these mistakes, you'll have these mistakes again. I
yeah,
don't mean that these particular people have to be shamed, but like there
yeah.
needs to be an acknowledgement that this is a bad behavior that shouldn't be, countenanced.
All
Um,
right. Let's move on to Starknet. How an outage? Seriously?
Yeah, so
Talk me
Starknet
through that
is
one.
quite old.
Yeah, it is.
So
We've talked
Starknet is
about it
a
this show before.
scaling solution. Yeah,
Yeah.
and generically the issue with Starknet has been that it is quite complex math off in its own little corner. And so there aren't a whole bunch. So like the optimism style mechanics are quite straightforward. The polygon style mechanics in the old days just have a multi-sig and bothered. Those mechanics are quite simple. The Starknet mechanics are quite complicated. So there's been a single operator. I believe it's still listed as a stage one on L2 beat, which I'd maybe partially argue with because it's all one group that's operating the stage one. It's a zero, whatever, but it's a thing that has substantial training wheels and is supposed to be a
Mm.
scaling solution. But there's a central party that, um, and one of the easiest ways you can tell a system is centralized is when it halts and someone
That
issues a
should be a
press release that
giveaway.
they fixed it, right? Uh, yeah, there are not multiple people involved. Now, you could argue that this is simply a case of a single implementation, except there's a monopoly sequencer, and it went down because of an inconsistency between the monopoly sequencer and something else. It doesn't even matter what the other thing is, and it doesn't even matter which side was right, because when you have a monopoly provider of something and it disagrees with anything else, the system stops. Right? So they needed to stop, they needed to revert, right, and then march forward. Uh, I guess they would argue this is the good use of a Security Council type situation. Um, as per the your face is indicating, right? As per the USPD conversation we just had, who gets to decide what's good and what's bad? If you can do
Yeah.
this, You can do anything. So you're arguing your intentions were good. So maybe we're the USPD hackers, right?
Beyond that, also, if you can stop something, chances are you should be responsible for it.
Well, because in this case they stopped and reverted,
Yeah.
right? Then that kind of proves that they, you know, in theory, whatever, in the abstract, legally are responsible for what's going on. They bear responsibility. Whether that is liability for those mistakes imposed upon them is a separate question. Um, but yeah, they should have done that. This is a very technically sophisticated team. The system is interesting, right? It's a bit weird. It's a bit off in its own corner, and it's the kind of thing that would have been a long-running, interesting research project that would eventually generate some useful software, were it not possible for them to generate a bunch of tokens and sell them for money. And that's what they've done. And like, it's too complicated for most people to use. That's why this stuff has these bugs and there's not proper testing. And, you shouldn't have billions of dollars in a system that has this kind of errors. Um, that's actually not a criticism of the developers of the testing. That's an acknowledgement that it's complicated. Like you're building your own complicated thing from scratch.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah. But it is interesting that they did come out and honestly acknowledge uh, what happened, which is, you know, okay. They didn't acknowledge that they've always been in total control, but they kind of never denied that either. So,
I guess you could call that growth.
I mean, they fixed the problem. I guess that's good. This thing has never really been massively used. And after they launched their token and the price dropped and there were complaints about that, I don't even know how important a lot of the stuff is. But it's just interesting because there are a number of, these people are all identified, the foundation and the
Yeah,
people who've been paid. The whole thing is very, very clearly understood. Now it may be a case where they haven't had enough use to have any criminal activity they have to worry about, but
fair enough.
it's a defense, right?
Okay, and then switching gears a bit. It seems like this double zero stuff just never ends. Talk to me about it.
Well, so on that note, right, double zero is another thing that's reasonably complicated. The thing double
Mm-hmm.
zero is
Mm-hmm.
trying to do is build a parallel higher speed internet for exchanging blockchain information. You'd
Fair.
expect a replacement internet to be complicated. It's the
Yeah,
entire plot of Silicon
like
Valley. Uh,
yeah, or
you
the
know,
net from
yeah.
the with
So
the
there's a
girl
lot
from
of
the bus.
yeah, there's a lot of that's a long time ago. Yeah. So there's a lot of pieces involved here, and the
Yeah,
fact that it would be complicated. Yeah. Uh, Previously, we talked about how they requested no action relief from the SEC,
correct. They
and they
got
got
that.
it on the
Mm-hmm.
basis of some claims about how their system operated. And we went through in reasonable detail one set
Yeah,
of ways in which those claims were false. So
fair enough.
we're going to go through briefly here another set of ways in which those claims are false. I'm not going to recap the whole thing because the context is whatever, but they've claimed that there is an automated system for the distribution of rewards and fees and the rest of it. And it's all uh, blockchains are involved. It's all mechanical distribution with no discretion, and so everything should be exempt from securities laws. That's the super, super short way of describing what's happened. Um, so in this case, we're going to talk about the way the rewards, so the things that you get paid in their token for operating parts of the system, get tracked, get calculated, and get distributed, and how that is not a decentralized process at all, right?
Yeah,
So if you have a decentralized thing, whatever, Bitcoin, except on the side, there's one group of people that decide who gets paid the mining rewards. Uh, the tokens are not going to be, commodities free of, right? In the same way that now I will acknowledge that the securities conversation is quite complicated because a shop controls its discount vouchers.
yeah,
So it's not like that automatically makes it. Our point here isn't so much that these people are doing unregistered securities business. It's that they've lying's the wrong word because they told the SEC that they only expected this relief to apply in the cases where it matched their system. So I guess
yeah.
they're gaslighting the SEC. I guess that's the
Well,
right word.
I guess
They're
it's probably
misleading
like
them.
I don't even know if I would go as far as to say that there's misleading, but you're basically saying a set of circumstances in a set of circumstances A where we're not as long as we are doing A, we would like to have relief to know that if we do A, we shall not be prosecuted or the charges will be brought against us. And I think that's fair. That's fine. Where I think that becomes an issue is that where you actually request a letter to say that if I do A, no problem. But then I don't actually do A, I actually do B. Now in that situation, the SEC is free to go for it and do whatever they will. Do I think that they will? I don't know,
Well,
man.
sorry, in this case, not only did they do B instead of A, but they also went on a whole bunch of podcast interviews and talked about how great the no action relief was without mentioning the fact that there
Well,
was just an A B sleight of hand, which
again,
just makes it a bit worse, right?
it's a bit disingenuous, but again, that doesn't preclude the SEC from going after them if they so desired, if they understood the issues well enough. I mean, but then all you're really saying is that, well, isn't it great that we got this no action letter that covers us in situations such as A, but then, maybe you don't mention the fact that you're not doing A.
I
It's
mean, those interviews seem like an attempt to make it too complicated and embarrassing for the government to take any action because they'd have to go
That's a
explain that all
strategy.
these representations
No,
were
no,
right.
that's a
That seems to be the strategy.
I
Um,
think I mean, fair enough. I think that is a strategy. And who knows? They might get away with it.
yeah.
They
Okay,
might.
so some of the details. So there is a telemetry system that tracks network usage of the various components of the
Yeah,
thing, right? Because you need to track it to pay people for bandwidth usage. Fine.
fair enough.
The code that does that operates out of a private AWS S3 bucket. So that's
Mm-hmm.
storage within Amazon Web Services, the
Correct.
storage services, and you need to have effectively a username and password to access the
Admin.
bucket.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So you can't use that code without that username and password. Um,
Which is logical.
Yeah. So, for example, Bitcoin, you can put a username and password on your personal RPC endpoint,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that has nothing to do with if you can participate in the system. You don't have to have a username and password to participate in the system. You can
No,
just gate access to your node via
which
username and
is
password.
perfectly
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah. Now, they can argue that you could set up your own bucket and run the code in your own bucket. As we're about to see, if the answers don't match, it won't get accepted. So it kind of doesn't work that way. Right? And these AWS keys are throughout the code with names like, you know, AWS secret access key, which is what AWS calls them in the documentation. So it's okay, but they're not obfuscating what's going on in any meaningful sense.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Now, the telemetry system feeds into this validator debt and rewards distribution systems. Doesn't matter the details, the way this thing works. Validator debt, effectively, you get credits for things, you have to pay fees for things, and they compute and you settle your bill up periodically. Fine. That's an accounting system with periodic settlement. Okay. Now, a lot of that code, similarly to we discussed last time, is not open to anyone to call, right?
Mhm.
Only the designated parts of the system, controlled in a manner analogous to the username and password we just discussed, are able to operate those things, validate the transactions, and the rest of it. Okay, so that means that they could simply run a different telemetry system, post different telemetry data, and approve it themselves. Right.
Yes.
There are some ways in which they can't do everything to the system because there are some immutable smart contracts doing some validation, but clearly those things aren't running the telemetry system because that's why there's a telemetry system that's not, it depends on AWS buckets, right? So you are able to make substantial changes to the thing unilaterally. The group of people running the code can do that. That's not the way this functions at all, right? And these sort of handshakes that execute these steps are gated the same way as we discussed previously, where there are specific designated things on both sides, and each side checks the right person is sending the message. That is not a permissionless open system. Right? The whole point is you just produce the next block, whatever, self-verifying chunk of information, and then it is verified independently, and you proceed. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
So, okay. They could selectively cut out certain parts. Your telemetry they could just zero, and I don't think there'd be any way for you to. There's no. Now, a lot of this is operated on a private blockchain, Solana L2-ish kind of thing they run. There's no dispute procedure. There's no way for you to participate. Right? You could just take to Twitter and moan, which is exactly the way you complain about a centralized exchange that's not doing what you want. Right? I mean,
Well, technically speaking, that's the way a lot of people respond to things that they don't like.
I, So I'm not saying that taking to Twitter to moan tells you that it's a centralized
No,
process.
yeah.
I'm telling you that when all you can do
Do
is take to
is
Twitter,
yeah.
right? Then or you can
It
email the help
seems to
desk, right?
suggest that that has the flavor that the thing that you're moaning against is centralized.
Now it's a little bit worse in these cases because as they've told everybody they can't exercise this type of control, they clearly will not exercise it on your behalf to address your problem. So
Yeah.
you're screaming into a void by
Which which
design.
which ironically they have the power to do, but they won't exercise it because they're maintaining that they don't have that
That's right.
ability to do that.
That's right.
All right, I'm
Now,
satisfied.
when one of their investors loses a bunch of their tokens, or one of the people who's backing the project has a problem that requires them to take such action, they
Yeah,
will then take such action and declare that it's, for the greater good, so it's perfectly fine. That's a
but that
prediction about the
that
past, right?
seems that seems to be the running theme these days,
Yeah.
which all right, I'm satisfied. All right, let's move on to follow up on the ETH content. That's a bit of
Ah,
bonus content. So
yeah.
there's a couple of things we want to talk about. There's the EIP 7702 exploits as well as Ethereum Fusaka, and then yeah, talk to me
So
about the EIP
we
7702.
had commented quite a while ago, back when it was EIP 4413. I don't remember,
Yeah.
something like that. This is one of the early versions of the sort of smart wallet delegated
Yeah.
control
Yep. 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 Yep.
to
Yep.
contracts, sorts of things.
Correct.
So some changes were made to that that I don't think fixed any of the real problems, and it was released as EIP 7702. Okay. And now there we said specifically, I think my phrase was that, this will be brutally exploited because it's a terrible design.
Yeah.
And there's a report that roughly half, I think the exact number was 48%
Yeah.
of the delegations under this whatever EIP are related to crime, drainers for the
Yeah.
most part. So if half are known to be related to crime, I think we can assume that's a lower bound, right? So yeah, it's it empirically turned out to be exactly as we expected, primarily a vector for attacking people. Um,
That's kind of the point I thought, but hey, what do I know?
Yeah, I mean, I think what people don't recognize is that, you have technically sophisticated users, users that know nothing, and
Yeah.
users that are, trying to do things that are beyond their competence. See, technical sophisticated users will try to do things beyond their competence, but I'm defining that to mean people who are, sufficiently segregated in the way they look at stuff, right? The private keys with the real money are not on the laptop you're doing the tests on, things like that. Um,
Yeah.
and it seems like this was intended to make life easier, so it doesn't really apply to the technically sophisticated end of things. It just applies to the other two groups. And maybe that's primarily the group of people that don't really know what's going on, click whatever they're sent, and that's the end of that. All right. I mean, automated trading bots don't really use these things
Yeah.
because that's not the way the computer's already there, right? You don't need the automation if it's a piece of software. So yeah, it seems like that was not a great idea. As with many of these things, there's no solution here because you are back to solving the problem of here's a big binary blob of compiled code. Explain it to the user in a way that is, clear, reliable, concise, and that they can understand. And I'm not sure you can hit any of those points. You certainly can't hit all of those points. I mean, empirically, no one knows how to decompile code and explain it to users in any version of computing anywhere in the world. So that's a hard problem. So there you go. It's interesting. Um, all right, and then the second one, this is with respect to the Fusaka upgrade. So this is intended to make various sorts of scaling things easier by integrating security. So we've talked about this a little bit before, where because the private key, public key pair things are the same across all the eval2s, you might be able to facilitate some versions of scaling by, you don't have to actually use a bridge if it's the same keys on both sides, and you just have some process for tracking what funds have to get bridged. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
if I want to make transactions on base and my balance is on ETH, as long as I can commit to the system that I'll bridge it eventually, then I could use the same signatures and pay out of a phantom wallet or, some kind of delegated control to a smart contract. Maybe. Um, so what I find interesting here is that this seems to be the final acknowledgement about the scaling impossibility stuff we discussed in some cases with the ETH people a couple of years ago when they stopped believing that L2s would allow arbitrary scaling of the system, and they're now switching from what I had deemed a measure of global throughput, global scaling. So from any account on any L1 or L2 to any other account, right? And you can't scale that because of the bridge congestion problems. They're effectively saying we're going to move to what I'd call a local scaling. So the total number of transactions is unbounded as you keep adding components to the system that can transact independently. So you can do 1,000 transactions here, 1,000 transactions here, 1,000
Yeah.
transactions here. Now you can do 3,000 transactions, right? But you still have to have a process to settle up across all the. Uh, and the strategy for converting from the local scaling to the global scaling, because the local scaling is not useful, right?
Yeah.
That's like saying your bank can make a huge number of internal transactions. Everyone knows that. Well, many people know that, and that's not the problem. The problem is bank to bank, country to country,
Yeah.
district to district, whatever. Uh, and the solution here is to effectively rely on off-chain services that will burn and mint the tokens, right? So if you imagine the way Circle works, right? Circle could accept your keys on different contracts and move the stuff themselves through their process, not through a bridge, just through some much, much simpler interaction that would allow scaling to be a bit better. But of course, you're no longer trustless. You're just leaning on the trusted party explicitly for the scaling. So you're
I think that's
saying, oh
called the
no,
banking system.
oh no, it is exactly. Yes, it is exactly. It is 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're saying there is that, Citibank in different countries will allow you to send money across borders, and within each country, you can use the fast, it's often called fast, right? Payment system, rapid payments, whatever. Yeah. So that's just what that's recreated. And they're
They have
leaning very hard on the trust.
they
So,
have rebuilt the banking system.
uh, yeah, yeah.
But and I think slightly shittier.
Oh, as I think we'll be talking about this over the next 2 weeks, right? The product that Circle uses to do this falls down catastrophically when it comes to even the simplest of sanctions compliance programs.
Yeah.
So they've rebuilt it in a way that's, I think, mostly quicker because it doesn't do most of the work.
I think it banks didn't have to screen for
Anything.
illicit transactions or oh yeah, anything. That's a good point. Not even talking about illicit transactions. If they didn't have to screen for anything, you get your money like that.
I mean, there's no reason mechanically that the bank can't simply take,
Oh yeah.
Swift code account number
It's
and
it, it's not
it
because
would
it's
be
like,
quicker.
faster than the speed of light kind of type of there's no physical limitation to that.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously synchronization, whatever, but
I
yeah.
mean the limit is that you can't see the money. The money can't go so fast that you can see the money coming. Yeah, that's not an issue.
That's yeah, most of the gating has nothing to do with that.
Yes.
Um, I mean, the internal Citibank stuff from country to country, you have to log out and log back in. I
Yeah,
assume the money's actually already in the database before you manage to log out and log back in. But like,
probably.
clearly, the rate at which a lot of this stuff can be done is quicker than human timescales. I mean, when you use a credit card at a restaurant, it's not 12 milliseconds. I mean, no one's complaining the latency is too many milliseconds. Like you stand there, the machine beeps, that changes colors in ways that have never really made a lot of sense to me, and then you're good. Anyway, so,
And on that note, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in the podcast. We're glad you enjoy it. And have a great week ahead. We'll speak to you again next week. Bye bye.